The air above North America is crackling with tension as the winds shift ominously southward. A message reverberates through the corridors of power: "We will resist until the end," declares Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. This proclamation sends shockwaves through political circles, igniting curiosity and concern. What could Mexico actually target in the vast landscape of the U.S. economy? Could it really cripple key sectors like automotive, agriculture, and energy? Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump finds himself fortifying the southern border, dispatching 1,500 troops as fears of fentanyl pouring in from Mexico rise. The situation escalates as Trump announces a one-month delay on tariffs for Mexican imports, adding layers to an already complex diplomatic relationship. In a phone call between the leaders, a storm of tension brews, signaling a potential economic Cold War is unfolding. Recent decisions by the Mexican government have left Washington on edge, especially with Sheinbaum's bold approach challenging long-standing perceptions. With rumors of trade tariffs looming, is Mexico drawing a line in the sand? Though not yet at the point of outright war, the actions taken and their ripple effects in the U.S. shouldn't be dismissed. As whispers circulate in Washington that Mexico might be seeking a resurgence as a powerful force in Latin America, Sheinbaum's statements echo loud and clear. If the U.S. fails to change its approach, Canada and Mexico might retaliate fiercely, leaving political figures scrambling for solutions. The very notion of Sheinbaum as a thorn in Trump's side has been echoed in the press as her administration lays out an independent path for Mexico that could redefine their relationship with the U.S. This conversation shifts rapidly, covering the hefty trade that flows between them, an incredible $800 billion worth, with 80% of Mexican goods destined for the U.S. However, amid the thriving numbers lies a chasm of disagreement over vital issues like migration and border security. Politicians in Mexico are rallying against claims of corruption, vehemently defending their integrity and sovereignty. As this narrative unfolds, Sheinbaum's administration proposes suspending critical economic agreements with the U.S. If tensions escalate further, the consequences could hit home in the United States, particularly in the automotive industry. With a significant amount of automotive parts and resources sourced from Mexico, even a slight disruption in this supply chain could bring American manufacturers to their knees. On the agricultural front, the stakes are just as high. Mexican products fill American tables from coast to coast. If tariffs hit, the prices could soar, and the risk of labor shortages looms large if agreements for migrant worker labor falter. Will this disrupt the fabric of U.S. agriculture? Mexico's delicate balance of power extends into the oil and energy sectors. Should the Sheinbaum administration decide to restrict crude oil exports, the U.S. could face shortages threatening its energy needs. The very landscape of energy consumption may shift dramatically, leading to higher prices and public discontent against the Trump administration. With millions of dollars weaving through their shared border daily, could tightening customs controls cripple U.S. logistics? Picture long waits at the border with trucks idling, supermarkets deprived of essential goods. For an administration focused on strong borders, the imagery of empty shelves would be a political nightmare. Beyond trade lies the complex issue of immigration, with Mexico serving as a critical buffer. If Sheinbaum opts to diminish Mexico's role in controlling migration flows, the implications could be profound: a wave of migrants seeking entry to the U.S., turning the border into a humanitarian crisis. The connections between their economies paint a stark picture. Disrupting the automotive, agricultural, and energy supply chains could burden American interests significantly. Investing in Mexico has always been lucrative due to cost advantages, yet a shift in this dynamic leaves the U.S. vulnerable. Sheinbaum appears poised to play a strategic game, perhaps leveraging trade agreements to assert Mexico's rights and negotiate a position of power. In a landscape shaped by shifting alliances and economic dependencies, how will the U.S. respond? Will they adapt to the changing winds, or will they find themselves outmaneuvered? In the midst of rising tensions between two nations historically linked by trade, a stunning declaration from Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has sent shockwaves through political circles. Her bold message, "We will resist until the end," has catalyzed a significant shift in diplomatic relations, not merely a trade spat, but a brewing storm that risks spiraling out of control. Can the U.S. withstand the blows from its southern neighbor? Which sectors are most vulnerable? President Sheinbaum's government made it clear, they will not yield to any pressure threatening Mexico's sovereignty. This proclamation was met with disbelief in the United States. Politicians began murmuring about Mexico's ambition to assert itself as a new Latin American leader, a notion that has sent ripples of concern throughout Washington. The Trump administration's protective policies have further strained this crucial relationship, with Clinton's recent statements emphasizing that Mexico will resist any attempts at domination as long as the U.S. refuses to reconsider its approach to Latin America. Sheinbaum's unwavering leadership hints at Mexico's readiness to counter any of Trump's strategies head-on. With every press conference, she ignited fervor among citizens who support the nation's independent stance. This has intensified discussions about the dire issues of migration and organized crime, epidemics that have plagued both countries for years. As trade between the U.S. and Mexico reached over $800 billion last year, it appears the robust economic ties are at risk of unraveling due to deep-seated disagreements over security and migration. Both sides teeter on the edge of a significant crisis, with the specter of tariffs looming ominously. Mexico's escalating pushback against unilateral U.S. policies marks the potential birth of a new economic Cold War, one that could change the landscape of North American politics forever. What happens next, and how will each nation retaliate? The eyes of the world are watching closely. In the winds of change sweeping across North America, tensions between the United States and Mexico are heating up like a storm on the horizon. These longtime neighbors and trade giants are clashing over security, migrants, and economics, with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum's defiant vow, "We will resist until the end," exploding like a thunderclap in international circles. Could Mexico cripple key U.S. industries like cars, farms, and oil? What trump cards does Sheinbaum hold that might turn the tables on President Trump's tariffs and border crackdown? From Trump's 1,500 troops bolstering defenses against fentanyl floods from Mexico to economic freezes along shared borders, this isn't just a spat, it's a brewing standoff threatening to shatter billions in trade exceeding $800 billion last year. Earlier, we delved into the unresolved wounds of migration and cartels pitting the U.S. and Mexico against each other. Trade remains massive, with Mexico shipping 80% of its goods northward, yet deep rifts persist over security failures and migrant flows. Can you believe the fury unleashed when Sheinbaum labels White House smears about Mexican smugglers' ties to the government as outright slurs, defamatory lies, and utterly baseless? The sting of accusation hangs in the air, raw and acrid, like gunpowder in a powder keg. President Trump has doubled down, weaponizing tariffs to choke off Mexican migrant surges and drug waves flooding into America. He accuses Mexico of willful blindness to border vulnerabilities, letting chaos seep through porous lines of defense. But Sheinbaum retorts with biting precision, the root evil festers in America's insatiable demand for contraband, a craving that fuels the fire from north to south. No consensus has emerged from years of heated exchanges, yet now, this friction ignites a wildfire crisis, threatening to engulf economies in flames. Imagine the shockwave from Sheinbaum's iron-fisted decree, halting joint economic ventures across Mexico's northern frontier. Fed up with one-sided bullying, her administration freezes shared projects, smashing windows of opportunity with unilateral force. Whispers from the Mexican Ministry of Economy echo through packed halls. The border's pulse of duty-free commerce for U.S. firms is strangled, rerouted in a bid to reclaim economic balance. In states like Texas and Arizona, business leaders feel the chill creep in, their coats buttoned tight against the looming frost. Rhetorical questions swirl like autumn leaves. What crippling tariffs might Mexico unleash on U.S. goods? How entwined is America's fate with its southern partner's output? And what hidden aces pulse in Sheinbaum's hand, ready to humiliate Trump's aggressive stance? Amid this mounting drama, the sheer heft of bilateral trade looms large. America craves uninterrupted Mexican imports, a lifeline woven into every purchase. The smell of fresh produce mingles with engine grease in this dependency dance. In the automotive realm, Mexico's dominance towers. Countless U.S. brands forge components south of the border, their factories humming along complementary assembly lines. Sheinbaum's shadow threatens to impose steep levies on these pieces, jamming the supply chain like a rusty cog. The once smooth flow from Detroit's roaring plants to LA's sleek showrooms could shudder violently, shells rattled by the tremor. Picture American giants like Ford clutching their ledgers, the weight of elevated expenses pressing down like a vice on profits. U.S. producers have leaned on Mexico's parts for too long, interrupting this bond means gargantuan costs, a humiliation that cuts deep, exposing vulnerabilities Trump vowed to shield. With factories idling in eerie silence, could this be the twist that silences roar of American auto supremacy? As night falls on this escalating feud, will Sheinbaum's next move shatter more illusions? The darkness whispers promises of retaliation, leaving us poised on the edge of what's coming next. In the previous segment, we explored how Mexico's potential move to impose additional taxes on automotive parts could significantly disrupt the automotive sector from Detroit to Los Angeles. This dependency creates heavy costs for American manufacturing giants if the flow of components is interrupted. Now, let's delve into another area of dependency, agriculture. The agricultural landscape tells an even more compelling story. Mexico exports vast quantities of fruits, vegetables, and meat to the United States. From the sunny coasts of California to the rural plains of Texas, restaurants, grocery chains, and major food producers thrive on these imports. But what happens if Mexico decides to impose strict tariffs or export restrictions? Prices in the U.S. could skyrocket overnight, sending shockwaves through the economy. Consider this: if the Mexican government alters its border practices, the impact on labor could be severe. Many seasonal workers from Mexico are essential in American fields. Imagine the spring planting season, with crops ready to go, but farmers facing a labor shortage due to new regulations. The potential consequences are staggering. Now, let's pivot to the energy sector. Mexico has a long-standing policy of nationalizing its resources, a practice that could have major implications for U.S. refineries reliant on Mexican heavy crude oil. If the Sheinbaum administration implements sharp reductions in exports, the American energy market might face an unexpected supply crisis. Although not a member of OPEC, Mexico's emerging strategy to increase prices could inflate gasoline costs in the U.S., turning public sentiment against the Trump administration. Geographically, Mexico holds a crucial advantage. With thousands of kilometers of border bustling with trade, introducing tighter customs controls could cripple U.S. logistics and retail. Visualize trucks lined up for hours, with shelves in supermarkets going bare. For the Trump administration, such a scenario would be a nightmare outcome. Until now, Mexico has hesitated to wield this formidable card. But President Sheinbaum's recent declarations suggest a readiness to change the game dramatically. What will happen next? Can the United States navigate these turbulent waters, or will it be left grappling with the fallout? The stakes have never been higher. The landscape of North America is on the brink of transformation, as tensions ripple between long-standing neighbors, the United States and Mexico. With the winds of change blowing southward, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum's resolute declaration, "We will resist until the end," reverberates through the halls of power in Washington. But what if Mexico wielded the power to cripple vital sectors of the U.S. economy? As President Donald Trump intensifies military presence along the border, the stage is set for an unprecedented showdown. A storm brews. Imagine the weight of uncertainty heavy in the air as President Trump, eyeing the influx of illicit fentanyl from Mexico, sends reinforcements to the southern border. A phone call between Trump and Sheinbaum stirs up a diplomatic tempest, signaling an economic Cold War that could emerge from the ashes. Tensions mount, and the specter of crisis looms. Could Mexico's bold moves disrupt the delicate balance of U.S. industries? Pressure mounts. Sheinbaum's commitment to defend Mexico's sovereignty poses a direct challenge to decades of trade conventions. With whispers of heavy tariffs on American imports circulating in Washington, it's clear that the situation is evolving. The stakes are high. Is Mexico truly prepared for a counterstrike? What would happen if the supply chains between the two nations began to fracture? Unfolding consequences. The stark reality emerges: Mexico's leverage is substantial. The automotive industry alone sees a swirling mass of uncertainty. As American manufacturers rely on parts produced in Mexico, a sudden increase in tariffs could send shockwaves from Detroit to LA and disrupt the entire supply chain. Factories, dependent on seamless transactions, might gasp under the pressure, leading to increased costs and lost revenue. Harvest of tensions. On the agricultural front, the stakes are equally high. The aroma of fresh produce wafts through markets across the U.S., thanks to Mexican exports. But what if strict tariffs or restrictions were imposed? The potential surge in prices could feel like a thunderclap from above, striking consumers with financial shock. Imagine empty grocery store shelves, and the panic that would ensue. A shifting paradigm. Oil, a critical lifeblood for the U.S. economy, holds its own narrative within this intricate web. If Mexico decides to curtail its exports, the ramifications could thrust the American energy market into chaos. With heavy reliance on Mexican crude, the ensuing price hikes at the pump could ignite backlash against the Trump administration like never before. Denied responsibility. Turning the focus to migration, Mexico has served as a buffer for years. What would happen if Sheinbaum put an end to this practice? The floodgates could open, unleashing a wave of migrants onto the U.S. border, creating a humanitarian crisis that would challenge the very core of U.S. policies. Would Trump's wall slogan resonate in a landscape flooded with people seeking a better life? The waiting game. As both nations maneuver within this charged atmosphere, the fundamental dependencies become glaringly apparent. Building alternative supply chains overnight is an uphill battle for the U.S. Indeed, Trump faces a formidable opponent in Sheinbaum, and the realization dawns: leverage cuts both ways. With trade privileges from agreements like NAFTA or the USMCA on the table, Sheinbaum could threaten to disrupt the flow of tariff-free goods, forcing Washington to reconsider its position. The final countdown. As the clock ticks down and decisions loom, one question hangs in the air: how will Sheinbaum's administration drive a hard bargain with a nation that has dominated the conversation for decades? The tension is palpable, and with each development, this geopolitical drama intensifies. As the two neighbors clash over sovereignty and economic might, the world watches, wondering who will emerge victorious in this high-stakes game. The scripts of destiny are being rewritten, and the echoes of their choices may reverberate for generations to come. By threatening to bend or violate the terms of trade agreements like USMCA, Sheinbaum could back the U.S. into a corner, setting off alarms in Washington about domestic production requirements and higher costs for American producers. Can you hear the distant rumble of economic shockwaves? The kind that makes investors sweat and politicians squirm. What's brewing beneath the surface of this U.S.-Mexico standoff? A seismic shift that might shatter Trump's grip? Trump supporters are already doubting the very free trade deals that built their world. But if Mexico flips the script entirely, the American business elite could descend into pure chaos. Imagine boardrooms echoing with frantic whispers, profits evaporating like mist in the desert sun. In this powder keg of tension, Sheinbaum's political savvy looms large. Mexico's nationalist and left-leaning masses have long chafed under the U.S. shadow, their discontent simmering like a pot about to boil over. Sheinbaum is poised to harness this fire, turning it into a blazing torch against American dominance on foreign soil. The ripple effects? They'll lash straight into the heart of U.S. border states. Picture Texas and Arizona, their economies entwined with Mexico in a dance of shared commerce. Trade lanes humming with the buzz of trucks and the scent of ripening avocados. If Sheinbaum slams the brakes on these crossings, she threatens to strangle the lifeblood of transit points, wreaking havoc on American politics itself. Washington insiders warn Mexico might outmaneuver Trump in this high-stakes game. Border businesses, fueled by years of cheap labor and rapid exchanges, could buckle under the weight of protectionist blows. The taste of punished for the anti-immigrant walls Trump erects. This slowdown? It might torpedo southern economies, eroding Trump's electoral fortress in the roar of discontent. An election looming, voters turning against their own? Sheinbaum could exploit the cracks in U.S. divisions, staging a daring counterattack on Trump, whispers a sharp analysis from digital forums. Such aggressive moves from Mexico? Unthinkable for some, yet Sheinbaum gambles boldly, risking political storms to assert power. The truth behind the blue is multifaceted. Why are U.S.-Mexico tensions erupting now? On one side, Trump pushes harder, more walls, fiercer patrols, cracking down on the flood of illegal migrants streaming through Mexico's borders. His allies chant the old battle cry, branding Mexican cartels as America's relentless plague. Heads must roll to stop the poison. On the flip side, Sheinbaum strikes back, denouncing this as hateful, unfounded slander. Her words cutting like a knife through the fabric of diplomacy. The air thickens with these accusations. Smells of scorched earth and unresolved fury. What twisted truths hide in the cartel's shadows? Could Sheinbaum's defiance humiliate Trump on the global stage? Or will cartoonish defenses crumble under the pressure? As the border throbs with unseen threats, the fight wages on, alliances fraying like old rope. Sources buzz about Mexican forces clashing with cartels, questioning if Sheinbaum can even hold her own turf. Diplomats foresee no full-scale border wars, but economic duels and diplomatic barbs sharpening to a razor edge. What if Mexico unleashes its full arsenal next? Could Trump's policies backfire spectacularly? The stakes climb higher, every move echoing through halls of power. Traders fret over empty shelves and spiking prices. Migrants press against fences under the relentless glare of border lights. In this clash of titans, who blinks first? And what ugly surprises lurk when the dust settles? Stay tuned. The fallout might redefine an entire continent. Recent clashes between Mexican security forces and cartels have sparked heated debates about President Claudia Sheinbaum's ability to enforce order within her nation. Picture the echoes of gunfire reverberating through dusty alleys, the acrid scent of gunpowder lingering in the humid air as armored vehicles rumble forward, their engines roaring like angry beasts challenging the shadows. Diplomats foresee no grand military buildup on the border, but they're bracing for an intensifying storm of economic and diplomatic clashes. Can you imagine the outcry from border states wailing that trade is crumbling under their feet? We're in crisis mode now. Right here, Sheinbaum could slam her cards on the table, forcing the Trump team into a treacherous political quagmire. Who knew Sheinbaum, once Mexico City's mayor, embraced a left-leaning populist fire fueled by nationalism? After clinching the 2024 presidency, she's unleashed a vow to defy the United States fiercely. The dignity of Mexicans, she roared in a speech that sent shockwaves across the border, won't bow to northern dictates on migrants. These defiant words ignited rage among Trump loyalists, racism hanging heavy like smoke, and left thousands of Central American migrants stranded in limbo, dreaming of crossing into the U.S. through Mexican gateways. Yet, what's unfolding on Mexico's vivid streets? Polls show vaulting support for Sheinbaum's ironclad stance. No more appeasing Trump's slurs or flawed migration tactics, citizens chant, feeling the thrill of Mexico finally rising tall. But peek into border business hubs, and unease coils like a serpent. Owners fret over hemorrhaging finances if exports to the U.S. grind to a halt or face crippling levies. These clashing voices thrust Sheinbaum into domestic tightropes, balancing aggression with caution. In Washington, senators united in a joint warning, labeling Mexico's moves as ruthless competition. Persist, they growl, and expect retaliatory tariffs or sanctions to cripple your stance. Could this humiliate Sheinbaum, painting her as the underdog bleeding under Trump's boot? Or is there a shocking twist brewing, whispers that cartels might exploit the chaos, exploiting Sheinbaum's policies to redefine power dynamics in a game neither side fully controls, their alliances fraying as unnoticed threats emerge from the fog? In an ever-intensifying drama between nations, North America's winds are shifting southward. Mexico, long viewed as a neighbor and trade ally, is now raising alarms as President Claudia Sheinbaum vows, "We will resist until the end." Her message sends shockwaves through Washington, igniting questions. What could the impact be on vital parts of the U.S. economy? What measures could cripple key sectors like automotive, agriculture, and energy? As tensions mount, rumors swirl that President Donald Trump is deploying 1,500 troops to the Mexican border. His administration claims that a flood of fentanyl is coming from Mexico, laying the foundation for a brewing crisis. Meanwhile, Sheinbaum, in a surprising twist, hints at potential tariffs on U.S. imports, daring the Trump administration not to escalate tensions. She believes that a diplomatic standoff could evolve into an economic Cold War, a situation so dire that it has left many in D.C. unsettled. Yet, the real question hovers over the gathered crowds: is Mexico genuinely prepared for an economic confrontation? While both nations engage in this delicate dance, experts warn that any misstep could ignite a trade war, leading to economic chaos on both sides. Sheinbaum's approach is bold. "We will not submit to any threats against our sovereignty," she declares. This stance is not merely rhetoric, it's a clear warning that Mexico is willing to play hardball. The U.S., which exports nearly 80% of its goods to its southern neighbor, could find itself on shaky ground if Sheinbaum pushes through her radical policies. Now, consider the automotive industry. A sector where Mexican manufacturing is crucial. American brands depend on parts made in Mexico, and if tariffs loom, the entire market could shudder. Imagine trucks lined up for miles, their engines rumbling, laboring under uncertainty. Such a scene could paralyze American factories, sending shockwaves through the economy. On the agricultural front, matters are equally fraught. Mexico supplies an immeasurable bounty of fruits, vegetables, and meats to the U.S., feeding millions. What would happen if Sheinbaum imposes tariffs there as well? Grocers from California to Texas could feel the financial pinch as prices soar. And then there's energy. With vast oil and gas reserves, Mexico has attracted significant investments from American companies. But Sheinbaum's announcement to review foreign partnerships sends chills down the spine of the U.S. energy sector. A suspension of cooperation could halt operations in the Gulf of Mexico, grabbing headlines and sparking outrage. As we peel back the layers of this complex situation, the implications for U.S. politics become clearer. The potential for escalating polarization grows, as Trump attempts to capitalize on the border crisis for electoral gain. But will the vulnerabilities in border economies backfire on him? Could Sheinbaum's strategies rally public sentiment against Trump's team? The stakes have never been higher. With geopolitical tensions rising, we stand on the brink of a dramatic encounter, where economic dependencies and strategic decisions hang in the balance. Will Claudia Sheinbaum's firm leadership finally be Trump's downfall? Only time will reveal how the story unfolds, leaving nations gripping their fate in the balance. In a striking shift, the winds on the political landscape of North America are changing. As tensions escalate between neighboring countries, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has declared, "We will resist until the end." This powerful statement sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles and raised pressing questions among economists and political analysts. How can Mexico potentially cripple key sectors of the U.S. economy? Let's delve into the unfolding drama, starting at the U.S.-Mexico border, where President Donald Trump has dispatched 1,500 troops for increased security. The motivation? A surge of fentanyl pouring into the U.S. from Mexico. To complicate matters, Trump has delayed tariffs on imports from Mexico for a month, and Sheinbaum, in a recent phone call, pointedly remarked that the escalating diplomatic tension has almost approached an economic Cold War, an unsettling acknowledgement of the risks ahead. Flashback, picture vibrant markets bustling with fresh produce, the air thick with the aroma of spices and grilled meats. This dynamic exchange reflects a long-standing relationship between the two countries, until now. Sheinbaum's uncompromising stance signals a potential reckoning. What if she decides to impose tariffs on essential U.S. goods? Sheinbaum's bold moves undoubtedly have the U.S. administration on edge. Her firm declaration against any imposition threatening Mexico's sovereign rights has sparked whispers among political circles in Washington. Could this be a harbinger of a new era where Mexico asserts itself as a regional leader? As she confronts Trump's policies, both sides dig deeper into a standoff where neither is willing to give ground. Tension escalates with a harrowing reality: trade worth over $800 billion annually hangs in the balance. American industries, particularly automotive, agriculture, and oil, could feel the immediate impact. The U.S. relies heavily on Mexican exports, from car parts that power assembly lines in Detroit to fresh produce that fills grocery shelves across the nation. What happens if these supplies are disrupted? As the situation intensifies, Sheinbaum's government is now contemplating the unthinkable, suspending economic cooperation agreements aimed at regional stability. The implications are alarming, particularly for businesses in states like Texas and Arizona, where cross-border trade is a lifeline. If she chooses to impose restrictions, U.S. consumers could soon see skyrocketing prices and empty store shelves. Meanwhile, Mexico's strategic placement as a crucial buffer in U.S. immigration policy raises the stakes further. What if Sheinbaum declares that Mexico will no longer bear the burden of stemming the migration influx? The outcome could be disastrous for the Trump administration, which has long looked to Mexico as an ally in border security. Yet, beyond tariffs and trade, the true weight of nationalism looms large, as Sheinbaum rallies her base, framing the U.S. as an unwelcome influence. Inwardly focused, she aims to unite Mexican citizens under a common cause against perceived external threats. As both nations brace for the unfolding conflict, the time has come for a stark realization. The interdependence of U.S. and Mexican economies complicates the situation. Can either side risk a full-blown trade war when both stand to lose significantly? With both leaders steadfastly clinging to their positions, the road ahead seems fraught with uncertainty. What will be the tipping point for Mexico, and how long can the U.S. maintain its assertive posture without consequence? Whether a trade war erupts or diplomacy prevails, one thing is clear: the geopolitical landscape in North America is on the verge of a revolutionary shift. The stakes are high, and the echoes of decisions made today will resonate far into the future. The winds across North America are changing, and tensions are rising between longtime neighbors and trading partners. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has declared, "We will resist until the end," sending shockwaves through political corridors. But can Mexico truly cripple parts of the U.S. economy? As we delve deeper, we uncover critical sectors like automotive, agriculture, and oil, which may face unprecedented challenges. In the United States, President Trump is mobilizing troops to the southern border, defending against a flood of fentanyl from Mexico. Yet, he just announced a one-month delay in tariffs on Mexican imports. In a tense phone conversation earlier today, President Sheinbaum asserted that the escalating diplomatic friction is veering into the territory of an economic Cold War. The implications are enormous. As Sheinbaum's tough stance against U.S. policies gains traction, the prospect of a major crisis at the border looms large. Is Mexico ready to retaliate in a tit-for-tat strategy? The situation is still in flux, but both nations must recognize the stakes at play. Recently, rumors surfaced that Mexico might enforce heavy tariffs on American imports, a provocative move that startled many in Washington. Sheinbaum's team made it clear, Mexico will not cave to pressures that violate its sovereignty. This declaration has ignited discussions of a potential shift in leadership dynamics within Latin America, leaving U.S. politicians jittery. At a press conference in the Mexican National Palace, Sheinbaum openly challenged the notion that the U.S. holds dominion over Latin America. For many, her assertive declarations signal that Mexico is prepared to stand firm against U.S. pressures. Simultaneously, within the U.S., voices grow louder, calling for harsher measures against perceived threats from the South. But the underlying issues of migration and cartel influence, unresolved for years, intensify the struggle. Despite enjoying robust trade, with over $800 billion exchanged annually, deep-rooted conflicts over security and immigration policies threaten to shatter this partnership. Sheinbaum countered Washington's accusations, branding them as offensive and baseless. Meanwhile, Trump's focus narrows on dismantling drug trafficking routes and curbing illegal migration. However, his critics argue that addressing U.S. consumption habits is equally critical. As tensions increase, Sheinbaum announced the suspension of crucial economic cooperation agreements along the northern border. The rationale? To freeze numerous collaboration projects that have flourished over the years. With this strategy, Mexico aims to regain control over its economic landscape, triggering alarms for businesses in Texas and Arizona. But what tariffs might emerge? How entwined is the U.S. with its southern neighbor? Mexican exports, especially in the automotive sector, could significantly disrupt the U.S. market. An entire industry, reliant on components produced in Mexico, may face turmoil if tariffs are imposed. Moreover, the agricultural landscape presents its own challenges. With vast quantities of produce flowing into the U.S. from Mexico, even minor export restrictions could send prices skyrocketing. There's also the concern of labor shortages, as many seasonal agricultural workers cross the border for harvest seasons. What happens if those avenues are closed? Energy ties complicate matters further. Mexico has historically nationalized its resources, making U.S. refineries dependent on its crude oil. A sudden halt to oil exports could send shockwaves through the U.S. energy market, stirring discontent among voters already weary of domestic gasoline prices. But the geographical reality of this relationship weighs heavily, too. The lengthy border, bustling with daily commerce, is vulnerable to tighter controls that could incapacitate U.S. logistics and retail sectors. The mere thought of trucks stalled for hours at customs, supermarkets stripped bare, paints a chilling image for Trump's administration. For years, Mexico has played a pivotal role in regulating migration flows into the United States, effectively serving as a buffer zone. If Sheinbaum decides to withdraw that responsibility, the result could be a humanitarian crisis, overwhelming the U.S. southern border with desperate migrants. Both nations are barreling toward a precipice. Will Trump's hardline approach force Mexico to bend? Or can Sheinbaum maintain her firm stance without suffered backlash from her own people? With public support behind her, the balance of power shifts, and the potential for an unprecedented economic and political confrontation looms large. The rhetoric is intensifying. As discussions of a new anti-imperialist bloc emerge, Sheinbaum recently addressed Latin American leaders, urging collective protection against foreign interference. If successful, this could fundamentally challenge U.S. dominance in the region. Yet, uncertainties linger about the resilience of her administration amid looming economic crises. Many believe that confrontational policies will fuel anti-American sentiment among Mexicans, potentially igniting a backlash that could reshape the future. The stakes have never been higher. Both nations stand at a crossroads where diplomacy, economics, and nationalism intertwine. Will a new chapter unfold in the narrative between Mexico and the United States, or will old wounds fester into an irreparable rift? As the tension escalates, one thing becomes increasingly clear: the path ahead is fraught with potential turmoil that could alter the landscape of international relations for years to come. The escalating tensions between the United States and Mexico are shifting the dynamics of a long-standing relationship. As Mexico's president, Claudia Sheinbaum, boldly declares, "We will resist until the end," her words echo like thunder through the halls of power. This fiery stance leaves many wondering about the potential repercussions on both nations, especially in critical sectors like automotive, agriculture, and energy. In a dramatic turn of events, U.S. President Donald Trump has dispatched 1,500 troops to the border, raising alarms about security. Beneath the surface lies a more troubling question: which aspects of the American economy could be jeopardized by Mexico's calculated resistance? With trade between the two nations exceeding $800 billion last year, the stakes couldn't be higher. If Mexico imposes heavy tariffs on American imports or restricts exports of essential goods like fruits and vegetables, the ripple effects could send shocking waves across the U.S. economy, affecting everything from grocery prices to the very fabric of the automotive industry. But what if Sheinbaum has more than just tariffs up her sleeve? Just imagine the chaos that could ensue if Mexico halts crucial economic cooperation agreements. Tightening border controls could paralyze logistics overnight, leading to empty shelves in supermarkets from New York to California. Could this be a precursor to a complete economic siege, or will it merely escalate the war of words? The sudden uplift of regional solidarity among Latin American countries adds yet another layer to the unfolding drama. Sheinbaum's defiance resonates beyond Mexico's borders, potentially uniting nations that share similar grievances against U.S. policies. Could this ignoble strategy lead to a coalition that challenges U.S. dominance? As leaders entrench themselves behind their populist platforms, will either side relent? Or does this mark the beginning of a broader conflict, one that could reshape the landscape of Latin America? The looming question remains: who has the upper hand, and what drastic measures will each side resort to in this high-stakes standoff? With fresh tensions brewing, the outcome remains uncertain, and the balance of power hangs precariously in the air. What will unfold next in this tense showdown? The clock is ticking, and action is brewing. The winds sweeping across North America are shifting southward, stirring the air with a palpable tension that feels like a storm brewing on the horizon. Tensions are escalating between these long-standing neighbors and trade partners, their shared border humming with the weight of unfinished deals and unspoken grudges. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum's defiant proclamation, "We will resist until the end," echoes through the lobbies like a thunderclap, leaving political arenas in shock. But can Mexico truly cripple key U.S. sectors? Which economic tools could paralyze America's automotive, agricultural, and oil dependencies, and send ripples through its economy that Trump's tariffs on imports from Canada, Mexico, and China only hint at? Picture this: in the Oval Office, the air thick with the musty scent of aged wood and the sharp tang of urgency, President Donald Trump orders 1,500 troops to the Mexican border. The clatter of boots on marble floors signals a ramped-up security push amid reports of fentanyl flooding in from Mexico. Yet, Trump announces a one-month delay on tariffs targeting Mexican imports, a brief pause in the gathering conflict. Claudia Sheinbaum, in a phone call with Trump just hours earlier, escalates the rhetoric. Her tones carry the bite of diplomatic frost, transforming long-simmering tensions into what analysts describe as an economic Cold War. The decisions brewing in Mexico City have the Washington administration on edge, their gazes fixed on the southern border like a wolf eyeing prey. Will a major crisis erupt? Can the U.S. withstand Mexico's independence-driven policies? Claudia Sheinbaum's bold statements ignite whispers of radical shifts, her nation's long-discussed sovereignty now solidified into action. Is Mexico gearing up for full retaliation against the United States? This isn't outright war just yet, but both sides' aggressive moves demand attention. CID from official sources, the Mexican government plans hefty tariffs on select American imports. What's more, the Sheinbaum administration declares unwavering refusal to yield to threats against Mexico's sovereign rights. This stance stuns the United States, sparking murmurs in Washington's political circles about Mexico's potential for new leadership in Latin America. Diplomats point to Trump's protectionist revival complicating ties further. Claudia Sheinbaum emerges as a persistent thorn in Trump's side, a narrative echoing in media far and wide. As long as the U.S. doesn't rethink its approach to Latin America, she vows to tighten policies without hesitation. Her leadership, firm and unyielding, suggests Mexico can counter any Trump-era tactic. A day looms when Latin nations will assert their strength against his dominant style, she proclaims from the Mexican National Palace. Pro-Trump voices in the U.S. label it hostile, turning simple trade disputes into a heated political clash. She's rallied public support behind Mexico's autonomy, while Trump's loyalists demand sterner measures against southern threats rooted in unresolved migration crises and cartel issues. Mexico exports 80% of its goods to the U.S., with trade surpassing $800 billion last year. Despite this, security and migration clashes drive wedges between them. Sheinbaum dismisses White House accusations linking smugglers to the Mexican government as insulting and unfounded. Trump's strategy targets Mexico to curb migrant flows and drug trafficking, accusing it of ignoring security gaps. Mexico counters that the U.S. must curb its own demand for those drugs. Long-stalled agreements now risk exploding into crisis. One of Sheinbaum's sweeping choices, halting economic cooperation along the northern border due to unilateral pressures. Mexico freezes various regional projects with the U.S., announced at a Ministry of Economy meeting. This means capping tax-free crossings for American companies, alarming.